Okay, welcome to another episode of Dave Trippin. We got something kind of unique for us today. We have Daniel on the channel from Letters from Japan, a great channel that can show you around Japan, not just educationally, but in kind of all the beautiful settings that it has to offer. So thank you for coming on my channel today. And Daniel is going to speak to us about his quite unique experience behind him, that he has a master's degree. So thank you for being in the episode today, Daniel.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, right on. So we can just jump right into it. Basically,
Okay.
I wanted to know, everybody I think who ends up coming over to Japan has a little bit of a story behind them. It's not just that, oh, I'll go to the other side of the world or wherever it is that I'm from. So what initially drew you to being in Japan?
Well, I actually, I was just finishing my master's degree, and my professor kind of pulled me aside one day, and he said, Daniel, are you serious about this? Is this what you really want to do? And I said, yeah, of course. And he suggested that I go try to apply for the JET program.
Okay.
Apparently his granddaughter, or somebody in his family had just finished it. She came back and raved about it, and he suggested this. So I did some research. I looked around. And I figured he was right. I needed some kind of international experience, and I investigated the program. Is really good, support network and a lot of great things, as people probably know about it. So I did it, and when I eventually ended up in Japan, I didn't really know. I mean, it was like 9 months later.
You weren't like a Japanophile. You weren't
right.
like somebody. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess the question then, like right immediately, I should ask is, what then is your master's in? Because of course there's a variety.
Yes. So my master's is a master in education with a specialization in TESOL.
Okay, very, very good. And maybe everybody has, again, different reasons for doing it. Why the master's degree? Was it a purely educational? Was it that you saw the monetary value in it, or was it both? Like, why a master's degree?
Yeah, it was all of that. I knew when I started my undergraduate career that I wanted to be an English teacher of some type.
Okay.
And I thought about a lot of different scenarios. I even thought about, maybe high school or secondary school. But eventually I settled on the university level, and that's the base of what you need to teach at universities or colleges.
Interesting. And so when you say that you were interested to be an English teacher, is that specifically to teach English abroad, or was the option as well to have taught to native speakers of the language?
At the time, I wasn't really sure.
Okay, sure. Yeah, things develop through education, definitely, right, as you move along. All right, so this is something I'm really, really interested in, is when you come to Japan, if you want these higher level positions, you would need either a master's degree or a teaching certificate. You need one of the two, because they are certainly not the same thing. One, you go from having a BA and you go into a master's degree, and you could choose any vocation, I guess. It could be a computer sciences master's degree. Or you could go to having the specific teaching certificate, which means that you're going to teach. Is there any difference that you see between the two, or are they kind of like a different means to the same end when you come over to Japan? My question, I guess I'll frame it a little different, is if you have a master's, is it basically the same qualifying level to be able to teach in any sort of medium in Japan, be that university or elsewhere?
Yes, basically, the master's makes you qualified for a wider range of teaching situations, basically. I will say it might be a disadvantage in that if for whatever reason, there are some situations, in which they might see you as being overqualified.
Okay.
But with that exception, I would say that, yeah, it's preparation for in whatever English teaching situation is going to be available here. So.
And would you be able to if you had a master's that wasn't distinct, well, the advantage, I suppose, that a teaching certificate is teaching, and you have the advantage that yours is a master's in teaching. It specifically focuses on it. Would you be able to come with a master's of something different? Say you had a master's in, I don't know, history, for example. Would that enable you to teach at the higher level in Japan?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
And there are a lot of universities, a lot of colleges that here that are looking for professors who are specialized in different subjects, not just English, who specialize in whatever sciences,
Okay.
engineering, and social sciences as well. But I would say the vast majority of opportunity, if that's your goal, is to teach at a university in Japan, the vast majority of opportunity is in English education.
Okay, I see. So it would be English education. The possibility does exist for the others, but it's kind of a narrower field that you're dealing with in that case.
It's definitely a narrower field, and I would say there's probably a little more competition.
Okay,
And
okay.
uh,
All right, interesting. Okay, so then what are the minimum requirements to achieve the masters that you got? Is it the standard you went through a BA previous and then moved on to the masters? How did you get to the masters level?
yeah, so the requirements are going to be different depending on what school you're attending,
Okay.
right? So if and that'll be different because because of the opportunities for online education are pretty wide nowadays. I mean, you could be living in Canada, right? But you could decide I want to get a master's in from an Australian university or American or whatever,
Yes.
because of because of the internet and the online opportunities that it affords. So that just kind of depends on what. Usually, in general, you need a bachelor's degree,
Mm-hmm.
um, and usually that doesn't require any kind of specialization in any kind of linguistics. People from a broad range of backgrounds can usually enter into a program, a master's program.
So I've got my bachelor's in history. If I wanted to do a master's in TESOL, you're saying then that I could do this online. And what kind of then that sounds amazing, really. It sounds like a great option for a lot of people to have. What kind of they must have minimum grade requirements, or like can you find a place? Say you came out somewhere with when is the door closing to you? Because say I came out with, like, for transparency's sake, like a 68% average. Would you need to have a higher average, or are there some places you could still attain a master's from if you go through the online or otherwise?
Yeah, are you talking about grade point average?
Grade point average, yeah.
Yeah, again, different institutions have different requirements. Some of them are higher,
Okay.
and some of them are lower. So I don't think, I mean, most graduate programs are, because of the fact that it's a graduate program, are
Yes.
going to have slightly higher than normal requirements. When I say normal, I mean compared to the bachelor's degrees that they offer. If
Yes.
if you're a transfer student or something along these lines. So, but it's not. There are schools out there. I mean, it really just depends on where you go. There are schools out there that where an average grade point average is okay, because in general, they look at a wide range of qualifications, not just your GPA. They look at maybe your GPA. They look at maybe your experience. Perhaps they look at some of them have a GRE requirement,
Okay.
some kind of entrance exam. So there's a wide range of things they might look at.
Okay, well that's really interesting, because I guess I asked that to kind of give hope to the people who always wanted to get the masters, but they felt that their barrier to entry was, oh, well, I had this lower GPA. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, no, no, look around, see what the options are, and especially, like you say, the new landscape of education now, you may be able to find something with an entrance exam with your qualifications that would allow you to then continue with this.
Sure, sure.
Okay, okay. And here's a big one. Here's an obvious question to ask. I'm sure, again, it varies, but would you be able to kind of ballpark figure the costs that people could expect from doing this?
Good question. Well, it's been almost 10 years since I graduated. So this is maybe not up to date. At the time that I graduated, it was in 2000, the middle of 2006. Um, I think I spent around 10 or 11,000 US.
That's quite reasonable in the grand
Yes.
scheme of what you're then going to achieve afterwards.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, so, it kind of depends on, your living situation and what your expenses are. But yeah, I mean, you figure it's only 2 years. Generally, it's 2 years. And
Yeah.
if you don't take a summer off, if you just really push through, you can get done sooner. So there are different things you can do to maybe make it a little bit less expensive.
I might have to try and get my master's. So where then did you get your Did you go the online route? How did you do your master's?
No, it's interesting that I wish I did,
Okay.
because frankly, and it's funny because uh, at the time, I think maybe 10 years ago, there was, and maybe it still exists, I don't know, but there's kind of a stigma that's associated with getting an online degree. But I think that, if you choose your school carefully
Mm-hmm.
and you make sure that's accredited,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you're wise about it, then there's really no reason for that. Because I can tell you now, in in the field now, nobody cares about that.
Okay. Okay.
When I'm applying for jobs and I'm looking for a university to teach at, they really don't care if I got a degree at an online degree or a brick and mortar type of institution. They never ask, and if I told them, I doubt they would care.
Okay, that's really interesting. I've talked about this like on a much, much smaller scale, of course, but when people have talked about the base level TESOL qualification, and they always worry, they're like, should I do the online, or do you think it would have value? Are people going to look at the fact I was in a classroom? And I've always said that in regards to that, it's more of an experiential thing, because you can't exchange experience in a classroom for what you would have online. But afterwards, like you've now described, when you're going to show someone that you have a TESOL, the first question out of anyone's mouth is never, was it an online TESOL or was it in a classroom? So that's really, really valuable as well. Like, it is a changing landscape to education. People do care about practically what are you able to do, as opposed to the kind of stamp that you have on your resume or whatever following. So that's I think that'll be really interesting for people. Here, I think, is another fantastic question. Okay, now a big barrier to entry again for into the public school system is this issue of being a native speaker of English. Now, my question is, if you were a non-native speaker, but I've spoken to people who have far better English than native speakers, but then are quite frustrated because of this barrier to the public school system. If you have a master's, would you then be able to teach at a university or a college or whatever in Japan because you have that master's degree, and circumvent the fact that you aren't a native speaker, but you've reached a master's level in teaching English? What's the word there?
Yeah, I can't really comment on, is it more difficult for non-native speakers to find a job than native speakers? Just because I'm a native speaker
But
and I don't
can
have
they?
that.
Can they
Can they?
legally?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think in most cases, at my university where I'm currently teaching, I know of at least three non-native speakers when I say non-native speakers, I mean they're not even Japanese. They're
Yes.
from like other parts of the world,
Yes.
who in there's two from Africa, one from Philippines.
Okay.
So was it difficult for them to get the job? Was it more difficult than a native speaker? I don't really know, but it's certainly possible. And I know a lot of advertisements when I look online for jobs, most of the time they'll say native like fluency. They don't,
Okay.
so it doesn't have to be a native speaker, but of course, I mean, if you're teaching a language, you need more of a native like fluency, certainly.
But that's wonderful, because quite literally in the public school system, at, call it, the lower level, that is a no-go. If you are a non-native speaker, you cannot work for the public school system in Japan. So that, I think, gives this other point of entry for people who want to take it even that much more seriously, probably have the drive in the first place, that they're really committed to it, and they can be making the big bucks. They could get into a university, they could take their education even further, they could, potentially do it online. So that, I think, is some fantastic news for people. That's really interesting. Okay, so now, For brevity's sake, I wanted to make sure that I got in a few subscriber questions.
Okay.
And some of them are, yeah, they're good. They're good. It's interesting. I think this will be a little more relaxed. So the first subscriber question was from Jesse Kirby. He says, okay, if I can ask my question here, what was the environment like have you started teaching in any universities in Japan?
Have I?
Have you taught now because you have the masters? Have you taught in Japan using the masters?
Yes. So maybe I should say for your viewers, I'm currently in Japan now,
Yes.
and I'm at a university. I'm teaching now at a university.
That's important.
Um, so are they asking
The
what the
question is,
environment is like?
what is the environment like? It's like when you go in for your day. Maybe give us a brief kind of like a day in the life.
Okay.
A kind of abridged version.
Okay. Of course, I preface this with, every situation is different. Every situation is unique. But in my situation, I actually live on campus, which I like a lot because I have a 3-minute walk to my office. So I leave in the morning, go to my office. This semester, all of my classes happen to be in the afternoon.
Okay.
But sometimes they're in the morning, sometimes the morning and the afternoon. I spend my mornings getting ready for my classes, and I spend the afternoons actually teaching. In the mornings, I'm actually doing more than just preparing for my classes because as a professor, you have a lot of other duties that have nothing to do with really teaching. You have to work on committees. You have to prepare for presentations. Presentations and publications are very huge, very important in securing a job. So that's just a part of an ongoing thing. It's not like you have any deadlines for it, but it's something that you've always got to be thinking about.
To pull that kind of out of the clouds, then presentation and publications. What is that? What does that mean?
Okay, so in the world of ESL or EFL, it's very important. Like if you are someone watching this and you want to make this your career, or even if you don't want to make it your career, if you just want to do like 5 years and do something else, it's very important that you join it's very important that you join some kind of organization. Like, for example, in the United States, the biggest one is tsol.org. This is basically a place where people in your profession can come together, and they hold conferences, and you want to present at those conferences. The reason why is because this is where you meet people. This is where you can learn things, most importantly.
Okay.
The field is always changing. There are new trends. And when one of the reasons you want to do this is because when you are applying for a new job, this is something they're going to be looking for. Have you been to conferences?
Okay.
Have you been presenting? Have you been publishing? Are you developing professionally? Because unlike other jobs, this is not the kind of thing where you go to school, you get training, you do whatever, then you start working, and then you're done. You just sort of work there for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Because of the field is always changing. You always have to sort of be in that mode of updating your skills and updating, what the latest trends are, et cetera.
So the publications, that would be articles you're writing on the act of teaching, like what you've learned about the process, or?
Yes. So it kind of depends on what you want to go into. For example, you can focus on sort of more practical teaching. There are journals that ESL or EFL journals that publish, for example, just like really interesting or good or effective teaching techniques. So it's more of the practical action sort of research.
I see.
But then there's also the more theoretical side. They're talking about linguistic theory
I see.
and
Okay.
how this meshes with other fields of like psycholinguistics and so forth. And that's more, that's certainly some things people do. But in general, I'm going to make a broad sweeping statement.
Yes.
In general, the theoretical stuff is for people who end up doing the PhD.
I see.
And the more practical sort of teacher application stuff is usually for people who are just stay at the master's level.
Okay. Well, yeah, that is a fitting answer. All right, that should make that clear. Okay, so to the last question from the fantastically named Tuba Buddha.
Okay.
Yeah, he says we'll read this straight through and then we'll decide how to answer. Okay, I have my master's already. Does coming to Japan and going to university to see if they have positions make sense? How much Japanese must one have to get a uni position teaching English? Is being in your 50s too old to get a position?
Okay, that's a really good question,
Yeah.
good multi-part question, and each part is really good. Um, So the answer to the first part is that if you already have a master's, it is possible to use whatever, and it's not in, English teaching or something like that. It is possible to leverage that experience and get a job here. However, I would not advise anybody who's in that situation to just come over here and just start, knocking on doors and
Okay.
looking for a job that way. You need to go, and I can give you some links
Okay.
to
Down in the
places where
description. Good.
down,
Yep.
yep, places they can go look online first. And there was one job I interviewed for, or that I applied for, and this is when I was still in the United States, and they were going to fly me over and interview that way. But it's actually illegal to just come over here and look for a job, so I
Okay.
wouldn't advise it.
All right. All right. There you have it.
And the other part of the question, now, unfortunately, Japan, and this is something you probably know, they prefer younger people. Someone in their 50s is going to have a more difficult time finding a job than someone who's younger, even in their 40s or certainly or their 30s. So that's, it. I won't say you can't do it, but I'll say it's certainly more difficult.
Yeah, it'll be a challenge. Like I think I've discussed this before in other videos. There is a sort of like, although this is maybe for different reasons, but there is sort of there is this idea of what they want, and when you're older, that's definitely contrasting with
Right.
that kind of ideal in their minds. Okay. And it was the one here. It was how much Japanese must one know? What level should you be at for this?
That's a good point. I would say, or a good question. I would say the minimum is like a level, what is that now? Level 4 on the JLPT.
Okay.
So that's like what would they call that? Advanced elementary.
Yeah, that'd be like an advanced beginner. You wouldn't have quite reached intermediate yet, I think, but you would certainly be well on your way too.
That's minimum. But I would say, like when you look at the job ads, what they'll say most of the time is that you need to have enough to be able to carry out your administrative duties. So what
Yeah.
that means basically is being able to interface with the other administration.
Yeah.
And really, it's not a lot. Like in my day-to-day life, it's really not that much. There should be a class just for that. Uh,
Sure.
I wish there were, and it would certainly would. It's not like you got to study for years and years to get there.
Okay, well, yeah, succinct answer. Doesn't need to be any more than that. All right, well, I think that's it. We rifled through there. That was some fantastic answers. If anybody wants to get a hold of Daniel, like I mentioned earlier, he has his channel, Letters from Japan. That's going to be down below. So I'm sure, Dan, you'd welcome questions
Sure.
in the future. Yeah, if anybody has them. Thank you very much for coming on, because I know that this is something I'd always wanted to help people with, but of course with no experience I couldn't. Is there anything that you wanted to kind of add as a few closing thoughts before we go?
I would say, just to sort of follow up on the last question, I said that the minimum is like a sort of an advanced beginner or whatever, but that's really the minimum. It's interesting how, in terms of qualifications, what they're looking for, Japanese ability is just as important, or maybe more important than a PhD, to be honest. Just in
Okay.
my experience, it's very important. So the
Yeah.
the more the better. But if you're thinking about just the minimum, yeah, an advanced beginner would probably be in just barely enough.
But it's good to realize, I mean, when you're moving into this higher echelon, you are in the thing you must always think is, I am in Japan. So what do
Yeah.
you think has value in the country? And I would think that language would probably be at the forefront of that. So that
Yeah.
makes good sense for people.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, thank you again. It was wonderful having you on for the interview. I'm sure it's been very, very useful. For myself, please, if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, check out my Instagram. You want a little more media from Japan, check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support there. perhaps we can do this again in the future. I'm sure we'll probably get some more questions that come up from this interview itself, which I would love to have you on again for any sort of clarification people are looking for. And yes, check out Daniel's stuff, and we'll catch you guys in the next video. Ciao for now.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Cheers.
Cheers.